Good. Yeah. What do you got?
Go, man.
I just reviewed a few records.
May I?
Yeah, go ahead. So heading back into esoteric guitar territory again, folks, we have one of my favorite guitarists of all time, Micky Baker. Some of you folks might not know who Micky Baker is, but he's probably one of the most influential stringmen of the 20th century. You might be surprised that I'm saying that, but Micky Baker was an orphan who ran away from the orphanage at 14 years old from Louisville, Kentucky, hitchhiked his way to New York, ended up with a bunch of rousters, gamblers, peddlers, living a street life, actually, even being a pimp. He actually hung out on the 26th Street pool hall around from 6th Avenue, and a lot of musicians used to hang out there, and of course he wanted to be a musician, but he had no chops. They all laughed at him. So he went into the shed for 3 years. He came out, and he ended up being one of the most important guitarists in New York City. Section league, station league. He was doing 4, 5, 8 sessions a week, per day, for all kinds of labels: Atlantic, Savoy, jazz, calypso. He was doing all kinds of music. This guy is important. Chuck Berry, Bo Diddley, Micky Baker are the troika that in the 1950s bring the music to a different place. So Baker ends up becoming a jazz musician, stranded on the West Coast, can't get enough money to come back to the East. He decides he's got to make money, so he starts playing R&B and blues and becomes who he became, which was the signature guy with the amazing solos, the great ideas, all informed by a theory that's not in his fingers but in his heart. So he reduced everything down to its simplest component to create extremely powerful solos. The significance behind this record that he did on Atlantic in 1959, after doing so many sessions for Atlantic, as a section lead, as an arranger for all the great R&B and blues artists, was that this jazz was factored into this record. So it is an instrumental record with a beautiful, he's got a beautiful tone on this instrument. He's doing Autumn Leaves, but his approach to these tunes is more, he's got a tick-tock bass. It's a little bit more aggressive, more rock orientated, but still the interpretations are beautiful. It's a timeless record. It's a very curious listen. So again, the reason I'm sharing records like this with you folks is that, be out of the box. It's great to have all the Impulse records and all the Blue Note records and all the Prestige records and all the important jazz records that came forth, but there's all kinds of stuff in the middle. Some of it's funk, some of it's rock, but it's jazz informed, and these are records that will actually change the way you hear Coltrane or any of the classic stuff that you love so much. It changes the way you hear it. Different things change the way, and the interrelationships of how things stand up to one another changes the way we hear it and how we appreciate it. So Micky Baker, 1959, this is an iconic record. Give it a shot. It was pretty, I don't know. I was tight with Roswell. He told me that, he thought he was an astonishing musician. So here's another interesting figure, folks. A musician who cut his teeth within a number of genres. Very known in the blues genre. It was on Charlie Musselwhite's first record on Vanguard, which is a really, really important record because it's the convergence of the white aspects, the white integration within the south side of Chicago, i.e. Charlie Musselwhite, within the culture that had settled post-World War II in the industrial centers of the United States, like Chicago, Detroit. So Mandel, actually coming out of the blues, informed in certain aspects of jazz. There's a certain jazz flavor to him, but he's really a blues rock psychedelic guy with jazz overtones. What's interesting with this record is the title is Cristo Redentor, which was a Duke Pearson tune written in the early 1960s when Duke was visiting Brazil with Nancy Wilson. and was covered by Donald Byrd on an iconic record on Blue Note. The version on this record is quite beautiful. It's impressionistic, it's majestic, it's extremely powerful. There's a lot of color in this record. Again, there are elements of psychedelia in this record. The blues element at the foundation makes it really sturdy. And then there's this little hints of the jazz elements that Pearson brought into the original recording that he's implying. He's obviously not a heavy harmonic guy, but again, he's honoring this music beautifully. This record overall is just it's like a dreamy 1960s fantasy, trying to just transcend the morass that America was going through at that time with the Vietnam War, with all the racial and cultural issues that were happening in this country. He wasn't denying it. He was actually he was informing himself with that to create a music of transcendental power. So check out this record. This is 1968 on Phillips, the original pressing. Not an easy record to find, but definitely worth doing so. I think I'm sharing this record again for you folks to realize that you can think outside the box. You like this record? So just so you folks don't think I'm going into high-priced record stores and spending lots of money on records that I don't have, because I don't have any money. I found this record in the Salvation Army. The lesson here, folks, is that when I went into the Salvation Army, I went straight to the back, and there were 3 large piles of records, all junk, all crap, all falling apart, all frayed. But I had a few minutes to kill. Take a look through. Flip through every record, and lo and behold, this was sitting there for 99 cents amongst a bunch of stuff that you would never correlate with this record. So, point is, always keep your eyes open. This record had eluded me for years. I knew of this record. I love Herbie Nichols. To me, one of the most important modern jazz pianists ever. I mean, Art Tatum, of course. Thelonious Monk, yes. Duke Ellington, of course, compositionally, in terms of modern harmony, yes. But this guy here, fully formed on his own in 1936. He's like 15, 16 years old, and he's an autodidact. This guy is spending 10, 15 hours a day in the library studying. He's a poet, he's a virtuoso pianist, but what we have here is a trio with Danny Richmond on drums, actually. And this is one of the few records that Danny Richmond did outside of the Mingus Clan in his heyday. And of course, a great stylist, Richmond, but Duvivier on bass as well. They pull Herbie Nichols in different directions. This is a bit different than the iconic Blue Note records. Extremely rare. This record didn't sell anything. And if anyone knows Herbie Nichols, anything about him, he was one of the few gargantuan talents that did not have the opportunity to have a career completely on his own terms. He struggled to get through. He died of leukemia at 43 years old. He played in a lot of strip joints and lesbian bars, accompanying women as they were dancing and doing whatever they were doing in some of these clubs. And just in certain ways sad. Just beat up, just frayed. Lo and behold, that's sitting there. Couldn't believe it. I did triple take. Do I really have this in my hand?
I think that's Freddie Hubbard's first record.
But my neighbor was Roswell Rudd, and Roswell actually fell in with Herbie Nichols. And he used to tell me stories about Herbie Nichols because I'm very inspired by Herbie Nichols. But Roswell was he left Yale in his senior year, and he fell into New York, and he went to Jimmy Ryan's, and lo and behold, fell in with Herbie Nichols, and Herbie became his mentor. And this was a gentle soul who just was a genius, and just never found his way through. And we're lucky enough to have a few samples of specimens of what he was able to do. So these are precious. If you ever find anything by Herbie Nichols, even as a reissue, grab it. It's a question of how that harmony collides into the swing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So of all these videos that we've been doing, I have not been remiss to mention Wes Montgomery. Timing is everything. To me, Wes Montgomery it's what we're all striving to be in life, and that is our own people. Hopefully we're trying to strive to be that in our lives, or just, without being unselfconsciously, pursuing it. This dude here is, there's a purity to Wes Montgomery's story, as well as the manifestation, that is quite beautiful. Dude just living in Indianapolis, raising a family, living what might seem to be a mundane, perfunctory kind of life, but he's playing his guitar, and he's got an amplifier, and he's at home with his family practicing, and he's playing with a thumb, and he's got an imagination beyond. And it was just our luck, folks, that the universe conspired to allow this gentleman to make records, because he is so inspiring. And this is one of my favorite Wes Montgomery records. Freddie Hubbard on this record. This is a very assertive record, and Wes is swinging his butt off. To me, one of the greatest jazz guitarists. Again, even with Wes, it's not even about chops, it's not even about technique, although he has these things. It's about making music. And again, as an artist, some of his records come off better than others. Some of the trios are a bit kind of okay, but when he's on, he's just, he's from another planet. And this record is kind of like that. So you don't see this record very often. I'm not going to go into the technical details of this record. I'll just say that these guys were on the West Coast. The Montgomery brothers were together. I'm sharing this record with you because this, again, is, he's on the West Coast. He's not on the East Coast. He's playing with his brothers. This is a very inspired record. The energy on this record is just over the top. Wes Montgomery with his brothers on Pacific Jazz, 1960.